Hi everybody, I'm Cat Lancashire and I'm here today with Mandy Aldwin-Easton from the UK Ichthyosis Support Group and Helen Lill from the EI Cure Project Association. We're going to try and explain the differences between the two charities and why they both deserve your support and donations. So first of all, could you introduce yourself, Mandy, if you could go first?
Thank you, Kat. I'm one of the original co-founders of the Ichthyosis Support Group, and we really support people affected by all types of ichthyosis in the UK and Ireland. If other people reach out to us, we try and help best we can, but predominantly we are a UK and Irish-based charity. And we started because there were no support groups, there were no charities supporting those living with and managing ichthyosis. And there certainly wasn't when I was little. So that was why we started the group along with a team of people. And so here we are today, quite a few years later, doing lots of exciting things.
Thanks for that, Mandy. Helen, could you explain about EI Cure?
Yeah, hi. I'll give you a brief introduction of who I am, and then we can talk more about EICure. So you and me met, Kat, because Mandy introduced us, didn't we? And that was because I have a little girl. I actually have three children, but the youngest one was born with epidermolytic ichthyosis, which is the blistering form of ichthyosis. There is some hyperkeratosis that happens as well, and that has a significant challenge for people. But when children with epidermolytic ichthyosis are little, the predominant issue is blistering. So when my little girl was born, we were really struggling to find information, understand how to care for her from day to day. So I actually reached out to Mandy. And because the hospital where my daughter was born, or the first hospital that was sort of caring for her, gave me information about the UK Ichthyosis Support Group. And I was very, very grateful for that information. And what it gave me was kind of a diagnosis. It helped me to understand what symptoms to expect from this condition. However, there wasn't information in terms of how to actually care for blisters, how to care for a newborn baby necessarily with EI. So there was all the information there that said that that is what will happen. But at the time, there wasn't much information as to how to manage the day-to-day care. So Kat and I got together and tried to find other families who also have EI. And we started a support group. And really, the foundation of that was just families, people who were affected themselves, sharing information on how do you handle blisters? How do you dress a baby who blisters when their skin comes into contact with a seam? And all of those things are the very sort of high demand issues that you face when you have a baby with EI. And over time, my background in research and healthcare led me to sort of look for as much information as possible. So I would look at other conditions as well and try and figure out, can I borrow information from epidermolysis bullosa? Can I look at information from psoriasis or eczema? Can I find an evidence base to support the advice that was being given by other families and what I was basically experimenting myself? Because in terms of the care that I was told to administer from hospitals, they would give me advice. I would look at other types of ichthyosis. There were chat groups for all the other types of ichthyosis. And all of that information was very much use ointments, use things that are heavy. And what we just found with EI was that it caused more blistering. So the information that was out there, the information I was being given wasn't helping. So thankfully, with speaking to other families that we connected really through the ISG and through FIRST in the United States, we found this big group of people and we could share things together. And I think part of that comes from me and being the person that I am in terms of my healthcare background, in terms of my research background. I simply could not accept that the information that was out there was sufficient because it wasn't helping enough. So I definitely spent many weeks and months doing so much research, reading as much as I possibly could about dermatological disorders, and tried to piece together an evidence base for how I was going to care for my daughter. So that's really me and our story with ichthyosis. But I'll talk more about EI Cure, I think, later on. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mandy, you've obviously mentioned about how the ISG started, but could you just tell us a little bit more about the aims of the charity?
Yeah, so I actually didn't mention that I myself have a type of ichthyosis. I have Netherton syndrome, and again, that's quite a different ichthyosis. You don't get the build-up of scales, the classic dry skin that you see, under the umbrella of the term ichthyosis. And so a bit like EI, probably the way we care for our skin may be a little bit different to the classic ichthyosis. It's all about getting together to find out what works for you. And I think that's what, again, the ISG is good at, and EI Cure project. It's talking to other parents with a similar, and other people with the condition, your type of condition, where you actually find what works for you best. It is very much trial and error. And again, that is what the ISG do. And our aims ultimately are to support everybody with all different types of ichthyosis. We fund research as well. We have a good community of people. We hold events online and in the UK, and over in Ireland. So we get families physically together so that the children can meet each other, adults with the condition, and of course parents of those children, to just be in the same room as someone who just understands what you go through. You can't even actually put it into words sometimes. You can arrive at an event, you meet someone, they give you a hug, and it can take a load off your shoulders, just those few words. And you really don't even need to articulate sometimes when you come to an event how you're feeling, because you just look at each other and know. And it's just a comfort to be together. And a lot of the time as well, knowing other people are just going through what you're going through, even if you don't perhaps see them all the time, but you can drop them a message. Whatever that is, it's about having a community of people who understand what you're going through. You can, share hints, tips, what you do, what you don't do. And by that, you find a way of managing well with your condition as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely, 100% agree. Helen, could you explain how the ISG has helped you over the years?
Yeah, I mean, the ISG was my first point of contact with anybody who had ichthyosis. I will always remember those early days with my little girl when she was in the hospital, trying to research and finding so little information. And as a researcher, as somebody who can find information, it was quite terrifying, I have to say. And luckily, the hospital gave me just a fact sheet from the ISG, and that is really how I started to connect with people. Mandy was like the first person I ever asked for help. So I will always be incredibly grateful to what she does, because she must do this for so many families all the time. And that was a lifeline to me. At the time, I was absolutely desperate. I had this little baby who was covered in blisters, and I just had no idea what to do. I was given support from the hospital. I would speak to a nurse who was a wound care specialist, but unfortunately, despite her best efforts, nothing was working. And thankfully, once Mandy connected me with Cat, we spoke with other families, and I finally started to piece together something of a care plan that might actually work. And I have to be really honest that everything that I had been advised at the hospital, I just had to throw it out the window and just adopt this sort of trial and error process. And really, I wouldn't have had the confidence or the strength to do that without the connection that Mandy gave me. So I'm so grateful for that. And yeah, I will always be in the corner of the ISG as well. And I think it's a real pleasure now that we can actually work together with our organisations too. So I'm so grateful to that. And we'll always talk about the ISG. If anybody from the UK or Ireland comes in the direction of our own organisation, I'm always like, you need to speak to the ISG as well, because their family events are so pivotal to feeling supported and making other connections with other families. It's so important.
Could you explain a little bit about how EI Cure project came about and the aims of that as well, please?
Absolutely, yes. So EI Cure project came about really because I wanted to do more in terms of research for EI. So because I'm a researcher, from the moment I had my daughter, I was always looking for solutions. I've always felt as though there must be a solution to this. There must be more options. So I would always look for things. And around the time that my daughter was born, a paper was published about a potential gene editing therapy for epidermolytic ichthyosis. And I read this, I looked for other things. There was only this one paper out at the time, and they had managed in a laboratory setting to find a way to correct the genetic variant that causes EI. And I thought to myself, right, I've got to connect with these people. I have to connect with these researchers. But at the time, I was just me. I was just a parent trying to find solutions for my daughter. And with the support group that was going on, we were growing pretty well with our EI support group, and we had lots of families. And Mandy knew that. So every time there was somebody with EI that would come along, she would refer them to us, and we would try and help them as best as we could. And you realize that we had quite a big community growing of people affected with EI. And so Mandy approached the two of us, actually, Kat and myself, and asked if we would do a webinar session for the ISG to talk about EI and current treatments, what the future might look like for EI. And lo and behold, the researchers who had agreed to be part of this webinar were the people that I have been trying to get in touch with. So for me, this was this amazing moment of, oh my goodness, all of a sudden, I can speak to these people, I can have an opportunity. And the webinar went very, very well. And I remember asking them, should we sit back and wait for research to start? Should we sit back and just let things happen? And they said, no, if you want to be proactive, it would really help if families wanted to be more proactive about research for EI. So after the webinar, we all met with them and we talked about fundraising aims and potential treatments for EI and what sort of research was possible at this moment in time. And this was almost 2 years ago now. And we realised in discussions with Mandy that it wouldn't really be possible within the ISG to just fundraise solely for one type of ichthyosis. And I think it's important to explain that all the different types of ichthyosis all have a different genetic basis. And I think typically EI is one of the types that is more difficult to look at a genetic cure for. So it depends whether an ichthyosis has a recessive mode of inheritance or a dominant mode of inheritance. And for a long time in the science world, recessive disorders have been considered more treatable than dominant ones. However, in the last few years, something called CRISPR gene editing technology has really come along in leaps and bounds. So all of a sudden, we are in this position where it is feasible for a genetic cure to be found. And this is what we were talking about with these group of researchers. So we really wanted to try and get the EI community together and rally in terms of trying to fund research for this particular type of ichthyosis. And we realized that the ISG couldn't do that because that wouldn't be fitting with your aims and objectives. So we decided that we would found the EI Cure Project. So now we are very much focused on research. Yes, we support families and we do our best to produce academic documents that help with the daily management of EI, and we provide support to families in that regard. But our focus in terms of our funding is purely for research. All donations that we receive go to research. They don't go to anything else. And I'm so excited and delighted to be able to use my skill set because I am a researcher. I'm a person who used to drive projects. So all of a sudden, I'm now this person who tries to champion our cause with doctors, researchers, but also fundraising. So we're kind of doing all of those things. And we've done well. It's been a lot of hard work, but in the last couple of years, we've managed to fundraise and we've managed to find collaborators for a number of research projects. So we currently have 3 gene editing projects going, 2 in the UK, one in Austria, and we also have another project going in Germany, which is looking at drug repurposing for EI. So it's really exciting, and I'm absolutely delighted. And that's just one part of what we're doing. We need to keep going and keep funding more research. So one of the most delightful things I think about EI Cure project is that as soon as I'm sort of putting the feelers out, trying to find people, all of these doctors and researchers are now coming to us and saying, we want to join, we want to help, because they're so tired of not having solutions for their patients. So there's a lot of enthusiasm and there's a lot of skill out there for this cause. And I think part of that is because EI is like this crossover between two conditions. It is an ichthyosis, but it's also so similar to EB. So we've now got this group of researchers. Some of them have an ichthyosis background, some of them have an EB background, and we've put them all together. And in actual fact, that draws on a huge amount of experience that we might not have had just in the ichthyosis world. So I'm actually hoping that this research will help EI, but it will also further down the line help with other types of ichthyosis as well, because there are other types that have a dominant mode of inheritance, and this research will help them a lot too. So that, in a nutshell, is where EI Cure Project came from and what we're all about. So yes, we're there to support families and give them day-to-day advice, but our major drive is all about research, and that's where our money goes. Thanks, Kat.
That's fab. Thanks, Helen. Mandy, could I ask what you see as important for EI Cure Project?
I think working together actually is the biggest thing, because by combining Helen's knowledge and background and understanding, a lot of the science perhaps behind what is needed for research and to push through for, getting those interested, because it's important for all types of ichthyosis, but because there are so many different types and there are also subtypes of different types of ichthyosis, it's a challenge, and research is expensive. So we all need, good support to be able to do that. But of course, what we also need to understand, and we do as support organisations, you're still managing it today. You still want to know how to manage your condition best today, and receive that community support to get through today if you're having a difficult day, whether it's yourself or your child or whatever that is. And so the most important thing I do think for both organisations is to work together to just support everybody with ichthyosis, whether it's EI, Netherton's, one of the autosomal recessive congenital ichthyoses, not that that's a mouthful, but there are so many types of ichthyosis
They're all a mouthful.
we need to support.
Helen, same question to you. What do you think is important about the ISG?
Oh, well, like I say, the ISG will always hold like this special place in my heart, to be honest, because without that first connection, I would have been very lost. And I think it's a really important thing to have that sort of friendly face of an organization. And I know that the ISG send people to go into clinics in the hospitals, so that, when you're actually going and seeing a doctor and you're getting this information and you feel quite lost and alone, the ISG are there, and it is just so nice. I see these pictures of, Mandy wearing her ISG t-shirt, and it just makes you feel so much less alone when you get to see somebody from an organization. You know that somebody's in your corner. And I think that's really what the ISG embodies, is that people know that they have an advocate for them out there. They see the ISG, if you look at publications out there that talk about guidelines for ichthyosis, the ISG are in there. And that's the thing, they have this broad reaching effect of like going to conferences, being in clinics, being doing family events as well, that brings everything together. And you can't really put a price on that. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people think that those things come easily, but actually that's why they really need donations as well. So I think that's so important for people to understand, is that you need that infrastructure to support everybody with ichthyosis. And for me, that's what the ISG is about. And it's, you know, Mandy and I, we talk often, we sort of try and support each other to some extent as well, because it isn't always easy to be a small charity supporting lots of people, because the majority of what we're doing is all people working as volunteers, trying to do things to help, doing our very best and working very hard. And I think one of the things that's really nice about having EI Cure Project and the ISG and all the other organisations out there is that we finally feel like we're starting to build a team of people across Europe, across the world, who are all starting to work together. And I think that is so important for people to understand, that there's lots of organisations working together, trying their very best. And I just want people to know that, really, that we're all doing our best, but we all need support. So if we want things to continue, we need to, you know, motivate people to do fundraisers for the ISG or for EI Cure Project, because unfortunately, without that funding, we can't fund our research, and Mandy and the ISG can't continue to do their family conferences and all the support work and research that they also do. So yeah, I think the EI Cure Project is just another facet in our team of ichthyosis advocates. And I think working together is so important in that regard.
On that point, Helen, about working together, how do you both see the two charities working together, and how do you see things kind of developing as time goes on?
I think it's important that we signpost for each other, and that's certainly something that we do, and have had discussions about. So if you go on the ISG website, you'll find references to EI Cure Project. And if you go on the EI Cure Project website, you will find references to the ISG as well. Mandy and I also work together in a variety of online support groups. So really, just so that we can make sure that people are getting the best advice for their condition as possible, because there's also a bit of crossover in terms of what I know about ichthyosis. So sometimes there might be a question about a different type of ichthyosis that isn't EI, but I can also help. But also Mandy has this vast amount of information where she can help people to find the right doctors, can find the right support with regards to support systems in the UK and Ireland. So ultimately, yes, my focus is definitely EI, and she knows that. She'll send people to me, or it might be that she hears something from a new family and she'll ask for my input, and vice versa. It might be, oh, Mandy, can you help out with this person who needs this help? So on a very sort of basic day-to-day level, we work together to try and provide the best support that we can to anybody who comes in our direction. And with regards to the future of where we're going, again, Mandy and I are going to the same sorts of places and trying to build those connections, trying to find more people that might be willing to collaborate with both EI Cure or ISG to see if we can fund bigger research projects or more broad reaching projects, because there's only so much that you can achieve within one country. So I think it's important that we work together to provide a broader network of care for people. So the two of us do, yes, my background is research, and Mandy has her own personal experiences and has been working with the ISG for such a long time that actually if you get the two of us together at a conference with dermatologists, we're a bit of a powerhouse, aren't we? I have to say. So because we know a lot of people, she's ever so good at networking and making connections. Whereas I'm lucky because I have more of a science background, so I can talk to people about research from that perspective too. So if you get the power of the network and the scientific background together, we're a really good team. And there are other people as well from different organizations in different countries that have the same mindset. And I think being visible is really important, making our organizations visible. Because I have to say, when I first started going to these events, people didn't know that there was a bullous type of ichthyosis. They didn't know there was a blistering type. Even people with who work for EB organizations didn't know about this type. So I think making us visible, putting publications out there, trying to get images and appropriate information out there in both the academic workspace and in the care workspace, I think that is just so important. And that's really what the two of us are really good at. We like speaking to people, we like connecting people, we like talking and shouting as much as we possibly can about ichthyosis to try and attract more funding, more research, more collaborations. And that I feel really excited about it, because actually when we get together, it's amazing. It's wonderful. And people can't tell us to go away. It's great.
I
So
think
yeah.
it's quite scary actually when you go to still these international conferences or these events, and we're there trying to educate people, the doctors, the researchers, the companies, to make sure that they appreciate that actually there are these different types of ichthyosis. Like Helen said, they may not know there's a bullous type. Well, it's interesting because if somebody has an interest in, say, Netherton syndrome or Harlequin ichthyosis or a type of ichthyosis, X-linked ichthyosis, that's what they know about, but they don't necessarily appreciate what the other types all are and the impact that those conditions have. And that's what we're always there shouting about and making sure that, they are listening, that basically people need, whether it's better treatment, better understanding, even just a more empathetic doctor, actually,
Yes.
it can be as fundamental as that. Yes, we absolutely want to improve treatments and care for people in the future. But goodness me, today you want to speak to a doctor that is knowledgeable about the condition,
Really hard.
refers you to a patient organisation, because then you're speaking to the people that do understand what it's like to live with day to day. And that's what we're out there doing. Absolutely. And, also making sure that those people know that we're bringing people together, whether it's for, a children's residential camp, for example, so the kids can get together and spend time with other children with, skin that's
So
like theirs. That's
important.
so
It's so
important.
amazing for them to see somebody else who looks like them. It's so important.
And bizarrely as well, it's the same for adults. Some adults will never have met anybody with ichthyosis, and that's really important too. And obviously for parents, just parents being able to be with other parents or other caregivers of children, or again, even adults, because you're still a parent even of a grown up.
Yeah,
It's really
absolutely.
important for those parents as well. So all of those things we can do together. And that's what's really vital, and why both need funding so that we can provide all these events, resources, and create this supportive community to live with these types of these conditions collectively known as the ichthyoses.
I have to say, when I first started liaising with these different researchers for EI Cure project, even though they wanted to find solutions for people with EI, they didn't really understand how bad it can be. So it's only really when we actually put together, patient stories about people with EI, and you collect it all together into one place, just about that one type, it actually really motivated them, because they were reading sort of patient testimonials, parent testimonials about what life is like, what the quality of life impact is of, 2 to 5 hours of care every day. They didn't realize, and actually it made them even more motivated, because I think it's important to talk about how rare this condition is. Like EI is 1 in 300,000. So even really experienced doctors who know about ichthyosis might only have a few patients who have this. So for us to really motivate them and to raise awareness, even with people who know about the condition, it's important that we get those patient stories in there, because it motivates them. They're like, okay, yes, I've been thinking for a long time I would like to do this. But all of a sudden, if you have somebody there in front of you showing you all of this information, it motivates them in a way that you can't explain fully. So I've always been so grateful that this group of people all of a sudden say, oh, yes, we really need to find a solution for EI, because it really is much worse than we even realized, or much worse than my memory is of it. There's so much power in getting a collective patient voice together, and making sure that that patient voice is part of the research process as well, because it might be that doctors have a perception of what this condition is like, but unless we pull together and have patient advocates, patient representatives working with researchers, we might not come out with the outcome that we want. It might be that they think, oh, well, we'll do this, but then they come out with a project and it completely isn't suitable for patients. So if we try and make sure that our organizations are like a bridge between the patient world and the research world, it's really important to get that patient voice into the process of research, because I want to make sure that when we finally come with any kind of treatments, that it really is something that people want, because getting funding for these things, for really rare conditions, is really, really hard. So we have to make sure that everybody gets collectively behind it. So yeah, I think that's an important part of things that the ISG do as well, is a part of
And
the
what's really come on actually, most importantly, in just very probably the handful of last few years, is that the patient voice is expected now in research. It's a huge part of, the ethical part of research now
won't
that
get funding
actually,
without it now. You have to have
that's it.
it.
Funders
Yeah.
look for making sure that actually patients have had a voice, that, is that sort of research something that a patient would even want to participate in? Because if you fund research and then the patients say, well, actually, that's not something I can participate in because, I can't use my regular cream, so my skin will deteriorate, or, I have to stop this treatment. So I think it's really important actually that patients know that now, that our members know that patients are involved in that process more than ever, and they will be increasingly in the future as well, because it's such a vital part of the process for funders that they look at when they're looking to support research
Absolutely.
projects.
It's also really nice that both Mandy and I, not always, but sometimes get invited to speak at the big conferences. And that's because people want to hear about the journey of the patient or the parent or the child who is affected by these conditions. And it sounds like a small thing, but it's massive. And it shows that times are changing. It's the patient voice is becoming so much more important, because for many, many, many years, it has always just been scientific presentations that are held at these events. So all of a sudden, to have people who live with the situation daily being in such a big audience, having that ability to connect with dermatologists, scientists, pharmacists, nurses, people from all over the world come to these events. So all of a sudden, we're being given the option of being on that stage, and it is so incredible, because you can just reach so many more people so quickly. So both me and Mandy, being the chatterboxes that we are, with all the history and the data and everything behind us, we're really there for everybody. We're really there for you, and we're trying our utmost to raise awareness and get the patient voice out there.
The analogy I always use is, if I'm up there and I'm talking to people about, whether it's managing my own condition, but actually usually I'm not talking from my perspective. I try and talk from the community perspective, the different types of conditions. But the analogy I would use is, I really try and get under the audience's skin,
Yes, very
because
nice.
I think that is what it comes across to the audience, and then they have a real connection to the person behind the condition. And the
Absolutely.
feedback I had last year from the British Association of Dermatology conference was just phenomenal. And everybody really was saying, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for standing there and, being able to articulate to us what it's like to live with these conditions. And it was really powerful, incredibly emotional, I have to say. But it felt like almost like a weight on my shoulders to be that voice, but
Yeah.
such an important voice. And long may that continue, and that we all have these opportunities to be able to share these experiences, because there's nothing like hearing from someone that either cares for someone with a condition or has the condition themselves, to really learn how a condition impacts your day-to-day life.
Absolutely.
I think it's lovely to see that shift, that patient organisations are now being included in that field. And just going forward, what would your hopes for the future be, Helen?
Honestly, I just think it's about building a bigger network, building a bigger voice, trying to gain more support, and yeah, just embracing that team spirit as much as possible. I mean, obviously, I'm shooting for the stars. I'm doing everything that I can to try and make sure that we build a very good research portfolio. I want to make sure that is recognised, that more and more people want to buy into finding treatments for ichthyosis. And I think, having that platform, being part of that medical profession really, really helps. So I think between Mandy and I, we're not going to get any quieter. We're hoping that we'll get more and more people who want to be involved in these things. And the more that we can encourage people to talk about their own experiences or about the community that they're a part of, you know, in their workplaces, in their schools, in their communities, we have to get the information out there. And I think for such a long time, people who have these conditions just feel afraid to talk about it. And we said
People need to be
before,
brave and speak up, don't
absolutely. And I
they?
think
It's hard, but they need to be brave and share their voice.
we were so scared about it. I was so worried that starting EI Cure project would sort of reveal a secret to the world, that people, you know, they might have looked at us or thought, oh, then maybe there's something. Why is she wearing those clothes? Or why does she look like that? And all of a sudden we thought, my goodness, if we reveal our daughter to the world, will there be negative consequences? And in actual fact, it was incredibly empowering for her. And people were so positive about what we were doing. She picked up on that. And all of a sudden, she's there in her class teaching everybody about ichthyosis. She was in kindergarten at the time. That's like 5-year-olds. They can all say ichthyosis. Like, I know that they can say dinosaur names, but people think this is a complicated thing to say. But the fact that she felt so confident and so empowered and so positive about her skin being different just will always bring tears to my eyes, because it's so amazing. So I think if you're out there and you're scared about sharing the information about yourself or about your skin condition, just think about the community that's behind you and the other people that you will help. And I think we need to start talking about it more. So if you get the opportunity, I'm always happy to help people. I have all these resources that I've put together for schools and for other communities and for conferences, and I'm happy to share those things. I'm happy to help people find their voice because it's so important.
Thanks. Mandy, have you got anything else to add to that about the future?
I think the area that is difficult to tackle are the companies. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the companies that are producing treatments for other conditions, it's really difficult to try and get into conversation with them that have the products. You know, you try and get to talk to them through the medical professionals, through the researchers, but the companies, I really want us to be able to, as patient advocates, be able to talk to those companies so that they can work with us.
That's where the research comes
Yeah.
in, though. So you were talking earlier about producing data.
Mm,
Those companies are not interested unless you have data. So if we are able to prove concepts, if we are able to collect data about ichthyosis and what it's like to live with it, and if we can make sure that we have core outcome sets that actually measure
yeah.
the effect of a treatment or not. Currently, we don't have all of that information. And that's why it's so important for us to do that research, because all of a sudden, if you can come with a data set, if you could come with a registry of patients and people who are willing to take part in things, all of a sudden, people are much more interested. And that's one of the reasons why in EI Cure Project, we're trying so much to build a portfolio of research, because the more you can present, the more data that you have in your hands, the more people will listen to you, because they know, oh, if we could try this project, then we can prove benefit. Okay, so all the data that we're trying to collect, all the research that we're trying to do is really important. And it's like the missing link that we have at the moment, because ichthyosis for such a long time has not been included in research, has not been part of research studies, has received so little funding. That's what we really need to push for. And then all of a sudden, those connections that we have through all the conferences that we go to, they will start to listen. Because already we're starting to see that shift. I've had people start to approach me at EI Cure Project saying, we don't have anything that can support you right now, but we're interested in your research portfolio. So I think if we try to work together and think of those ideas, what research do we want to fund? And we have to be proactive, and we have to approach people and say, this is what we would like to do. Can you do it? Or is there somebody else that you can think of doing it? And that's very much what we've had to do in EI Cure Project, is champion the cause, bring everybody together, try and get everybody to think together, right, what can we do? How can we move forwards with EI? We need to do exactly the same thing with all types of ichthyosis. The more data that we collect, the more information that we have, the more we know what does work, what doesn't work. That all comes together. And if we can bring all of our researchers and all of our resources together, we will find a way to build that bridge between technology companies, pharmaceutical companies, and the researchers. It is there for the taking. We just have to make it happen. And I know that we can. And I know that working together, we will be able to do it. So I have a lot of positivity for the future and a lot of optimism, because I think we have the very foundation of that now. And I think we're just going to continue to build on that. So have faith, Mandy, we can do it.
Well, I think if anybody can do it, the pair of you are very dedicated and tenacious, and working well together. So I think that's this has been really helpful to see how the two charities and organisations are working together, and yes, doing some different things, but also doing a lot together. And I think that's really powerful for the whole ichthyosis community. So thank you very much, ladies, for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.